You're listening to Spurscast, episode 574. My name is Paul Garcia, and I'm your host here at the Spurscast. Due to COVID-19 and the NBA season in suspension, we're going to hold another free-flowing Spurscast episode where I'll be joined by my colleagues Michael DeLeon, Benjamin Bornstein, and Colin Reed. For those listeners that follow me on Twitter, I asked you all to send me some Spurs questions you wanted us to answer. I got so many questions and responses that I've actually had to split this up into multiple episodes. So for this episode, we're going to tackle a few of your questions, and then we will save the rest for the next episode. So welcome, guys. Obviously, the circumstances that we're in, we talked about this last week with John, Joe, and Steven. So just kind of want to check in on how everybody's doing and how y'all are feeling, if you're taking care of yourself, your family. Ben, let's start off with you because you're actually out of Texas. You're out in Florida, you said.
Yeah, went down to Florida, hanging with my parents and my sister now, so we're all chilling out in this Florida heat. So, yay us. Yay old people living in Florida.
Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm here like in I work from home and I always have for the past 5 years or so, so I'm kind of used to it, but I'm just starting to get a little bit of cabin fever, so I have to like go outside for walks every once in a while. But I'm staying away from anything besides like where my house is at. So doing good. Everybody in my family is doing great.
That's good to hear. And Colin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well as well. Everyone I know seems to be healthy, and I haven't gotten too stir crazy at home or anything yet. But I guess we're only in week 3, so we'll see how I feel in week 7 or 8.
Yeah, that's one thing, is definitely finding hobbies and things. We're going to talk about that later. So, okay, so Spurscast listeners, we're going to go ahead and dive right into this episode with a lot of your questions that you sent to us. I've already let the panelists here know ahead of time what the questions were. So one of our first ones we got was, who are free agents the Spurs should target this offseason? So that was one of our first questions. So before we get to this question, I think the first thing we need to do is we need to break down what this roster might look like next season before we can answer this question. So what I've done is I've written down the positions that are probably going to be back next year. And from what I see, I think it's going to be 12 players back just based on where the roster stands. So at the 1, you have DeJounte Murray as your starter. You have Patty Mills as his backup. At the 2, it's very open where you could put Derek White there starting, or you could put Lonnie Walker the 4th, or even Keldon Johnson. At the 3, it really depends on DeMar DeRozan whether or not he opts into his contract, or he tries to get out of San Antonio via sign and trade. And then, of course, you have maybe Keldon Johnson there. So the 3 looks like there is an opening there because, again, if DeRozan leaves, or if the Spurs aren't ready to put Johnson as their starting 3, plus he's not, I think he's like 6'6", he's not quite like 6'7" or 6'8". Then at the 4, they're pretty stacked. They have Trey Lyles most likely going to be back. They have Rudy Gay, and then they have Lukas Samanic, who will be entering year 2. At the 5, it could be a spot where there's a lot of a vacancy because they do have LaMarcus Aldridge back next year. Jakob Poeltl is a restricted free agent. I do feel that they are going to bring him back. And then Chimezie Metu, like we talked about last week, it looks like there's a good chance he could end up being gone from the roster. So, guys, if I had to pick some positions that they're going to be open, I'd say the third string, should I say, point guard spot. I'd say maybe a starter or backup level 3, a small forward, maybe a backup 5 in the event Jakob leaves. A starting 2 guard, though, there's not a lot out there at the price that the Spurs can afford. And then maybe a starting 4, if there's a player out there who's better than Trey Lyles, Rudy Gay, or Lukas Samanic. Now, what do the Spurs have? They have the 11th pick most likely right now. Obviously, we don't know. The lottery hasn't happened. If the season ends right now as it is, they will probably have the 11th pick in the draft. They also have most likely, whether DeRozan leaves or not, they're going to have access to the non-tax mid-level exception, which is right now worth $9.8 million. That could decrease depending on what happens with the whole financial situation of the NBA. And then lastly, they have the veteran minimum available. So, Colin, I'll go and start with you. Did you have any names that you maybe picked off that you were looking at for the Spurs that could possibly target this offseason?
So I don't have any names, but I do have like the player archetype that I think would be good for the Spurs to go after. And that would be, I think it's a term that John Hollinger kind of invented, which is second draft, where you have NBA teams, especially if the Spurs look like they're going to pivot into a rebuild and it looks like it's going to be a while before they're back into contention. Then I think really they just need to start piling up contracts and players that are kind of like, they were drafted, they showed potential maybe in college, but it didn't work out with their first team. So maybe in a new place they can perform better. They're not going to have high expectations. You can split up the MLE into multiple different signings. And so especially at the wing position, those types of players. But I think that's really what they need to be going for, is just trying to sign as many young players who maybe have potential but are going to be available on less expensive contracts, just to see who hits.
Okay, Ben, did you have any targets or archetypes like just Colin just said there?
I mean, I have a couple of targets, but they're all going to be way too expensive.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking. I mean, the guys available are, well, most of them have a player option that they're probably going to opt into. Some of them are unrestricted outright. Like a Danilo Gallinari is unrestricted, but he's going to be too expensive.
Yeah.
But that is kind of the guy you'd really love to have like that is really want. A Joe Harris is unrestricted, but again, probably going to be too expensive. Montrezl Harrell be unrestricted, great little power forward, but he's earned himself a nice paycheck, whoever ends up signing him next. So, it's hard. This isn't the free agency class you're trying to make moves. You're trying to make moves in the 2021 free agency class, and I think you and I have discussed that a few times now. And really, it's going to come down to the Spurs need to either draft incredibly well this year, or they need to almost punt on it and say we're gonna give up our 11th pick, we're gonna move down, take 2 lower picks, or take a decent, take a shot at someone else's pick that's like unprotected, or maybe it's only lottery protected for the next year, for next year's draft, and then give yourself a shot at a better player and a better draft. But I do think the Spurs will have options at the 11th pick this year. So it really comes down to what they believe is going to be their best option. Should they just go chase a couple guys in free agency just to kind of shore up some spots? Should they give those spots to a Lukas Šimanić? Do they bring Keldon Johnson up full time? Do they bring Chimezie Metu up full time? Honestly, I think those might be their better options rather than trying to go out and just spend money for the sake of spending money and get a free agent.
Okay. Mike, who were some of your targets?
I think 2 names I thought of that are on very cheap contracts, but are probably going to get paid this offseason. One, like dream scenario, would be like Christian Wood, but he's going to get paid. He's probably going to end up returning there, or going to go sign with the big market team. Dwight Howard, what could add some depth, but again, I think he's earned himself a nice contract with the Lakers this season. If they want to sign somebody like in a Marco role, I think Kyle Korver will be there. There's a few years ago, a guy's going to be a free agent. A few years ago, I think would have been good was Stanley Johnson. I'm not sure where he's at now. And then
he's going to be he's in Milwaukee, I think, or Toronto. Sorry, Toronto.
Yeah. And then I've been doing some roster analysis for lineups lately, just a few here and there, just to try to keep busy. And one guy I think that they probably will part with, but I don't know if he'd fit in because he's kind of like a Bryn guy where he can shoot, but he's an undersized 2, and that's Etuan Moore. So, that's really those were really all the names that I think really honestly the best off-season moves for them are going to be bring guys up from G League like Keldon, like Luka.
Yeah. And for me, I kind of had from all y'all, I kind of have like 2 groups. I have the competitive route, like if they're still trying to chase the playoffs and get in there next season. I have guys like maybe Jay Crowder, you can make him your starter or backup 3. And then as a backup 5, in case Jakob leaves, Jakob Poeltl, maybe give the MLE to Tristan Thompson, Mason Plumlee, one of those kind of players, Aaron Baines, a Marc Gasol, a Serge Ibaka. So again, if you're trying to stay competitive, maybe those players, Ben, I mentioned this name too, like you, Montrezl Harrell. Again, I think he's going to be more than the $9 million the Spurs can offer. I think he's just out of there. Same thing for Joe Harris as well. Now, if they want to go with the route that Colin said, like a second draft, I did have some young players too there that I think they should just do that with, which is a player like Chris Dunn. Give him some minutes at the point guard, see what he has from Chicago. Maybe Dario Saric, he's going to be a restricted free agent. Again, I think they could probably get him for the MLE. And maybe somebody like Kent Bazemore, who's never really worked out. He's moved around a lot. Just see and I know they had interest in him years ago when he was back with the Warriors. I remember asking him that in the locker room. So there's like honestly, out of all the names we look at, and because the Spurs they're not going to have like a max level free agent contract to offer whether DeRozan leaves or stays. I think the best fit is just to give their young guys the minutes, give Keldon minutes, give Lonnie, give Lucas Samanic, that kind of thing, and whoever the 11th pick is or whatever lottery pick that they get this year. I think that's the best route, and honestly, like I just don't see this team one making the playoffs just based on the personnel they have right now, and then two, there's no moves in free agency that I see that bumped them up a step. So thanks guys for answering that question. Let's move on to our second question from Spurs Twitter. It says, what's a realistic trade target for DeMar DeRozan if they decide to sign and trade him? Okay, so we kind of explored this a little bit last week. And here's the thing, though, you got to remember is that one, for this to happen, DeRozan's basically walking away from $27 million that he could have this coming season in San Antonio if he declines that player option and wants to do a sign and trade. And two, what was the second point? Oh, any sign and trade offer has to be a 3-year deal. We got to remember the CBA language that it needs to be 3 years at minimum. So we're not talking about a 1 year. He just goes to a playoff team, or 2 years. It has to be 3 years or more. So here's two questions that I have before we can even look in this question is, what is his market value? I just don't know that. Again, he's walking away from $27.7 million. I don't see him getting that again. At this stage of his career, when he's getting older. He's playing the type of basketball that's not really wanted in the NBA as much anymore with no 3-point shooting. He's a really good, ball distributor, but again, he takes a lot from your offense because he has to have the ball. He's a really good playmaker, but then defensively, we know that he has his lapses. So I'm going to first ask this question to each of you. What do you think his value is? You can give me a number or you can give me kind of a range. I'll give you mine first. And if you like mine, you can just agree with it. I think 18 to 24 million. Let's start off with Mike this time. Mike, what do you think DeRozan's value is this year in a 1 year, in terms of 1 year salary?
Yeah, no, I actually agree with you. I was going to say about 20 to 22, but I think according to the wire, 18 to 24 is probably a little better. I really felt like, honestly, taking that option is going to be his best choice.
Ben, what do you think his value is this offseason?
Too much. Whoever pays him,
okay,
too much. It doesn't matter what that number is. If you ask me, the problem is people are going to say, oh, he's a good veteran. He goes out and gets buckets. He's a good distributor, all that jazz. But in the end, again, he doesn't shoot threes. He doesn't shoot them at a clip befitting of someone who wants to get paid. So I think some team is going to be dumb and they are going to give him too much money. Unless you give him like 10 million, in which case. Oh, okay, that's not surprising. Well, but like you said, he can still opt in. How much was the last year opt in?
27.7 million.
That's more than he's going to make. He may not enjoy playing for the Spurs, but that's more money than he's going to make if he opts out and he tries to get signed by another team.
I agree with you. Colin, what would your value be in terms of projection for him?
Well, so we talked about this before we started recording, how Bobby Marks and some others have said that maybe the cap can stay at the level that it was projected to be at next season already. But I do think with how much has happened and how weird this whole situation is, we don't know where the cap is going to be. And let's say that the cap doesn't stay where it's at, and now instead of being the 115 million that it's projected to be at, it's 100 million, right? So, and obviously we're talking about if the cap is what it was projected to be at. I do think that 18 to 24 million, that low 20 million makes a lot of sense. But if the cap drops drastically, all of a sudden the market for DeRozan just goes away. Like even that price range, it's just not there. So I think there's so many question marks for him and for so many of the other free agents in this class. Just like Mike said, opting in really is the best option for him.
Yeah, and that's why at this point now, I really, with everything going on, I really just think he's going to opt in. Even if like Ben said, even if he doesn't like playing here, I don't think he's going to walk in 27 million. But let's still try to answer the question. So let's keep going with this, even though I think we all think that he's going to stay. I think the second question has to be, what team does he fit with? So that's another problem, is that he's not your typical, star, because like Ben said, he doesn't shoot threes. He plays a very different style of basketball where he's more so of like a point guard, like in your half court offense, where he has to have the majority of your possessions, and he can do things with that. He can create for your offense, but then again, there's all those other factors where he doesn't shoot threes, where he doesn't play defense, blah blah blah. We know them all. So I haven't even looked into the cap configurations of this, because again, we don't know what, like Colin just said, we don't know how the cap's going to actually turn out. So I'm just assuming these are some teams that might look at him as an option. first two teams that have cap space, they don't even have to do a sign and trade. I would say that's the New York Knicks because again, they're one of the bottom 10 offenses. They need help. They don't have any playmakers. And then the Detroit Pistons are also going to be a team with cap space, projected to be a team with cap space. And those are two teams that are in the bottom 10 on offense. They don't have a playmaker. You know, you can't just think of any one guy in your head who's like a really as good as DeRozan as a playmaker on either of those teams. Now, teams that might need to do a sign and trade to get him, and these are again bad offenses. The Chicago Bulls, maybe something a package centered around Otto Porter Jr. The Hornets, but again, I don't know if you know. I think that they would probably want to send Terry Rozier or somebody like that, but I doubt the Spurs want to do that. And then of course the team we've heard the most of noise with DeRozan, it's the Orlando Magic. I think it just fits perfectly because again, they need a playmaker at the wing or guard spot, and DeRozan can fulfill that. And then they have, you know, veterans who really haven't panned out, like Aaron Gordon, you know, and maybe even a guy like Evan Fournier. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent. They could basically do like a swap where they sign him and then send him over Orlando, and the Spurs sign DeRozan. I mean, you know, and send him over. Let's start with Ben for this one. Did you have any teams on your list that could work with the sign and trade for DeRozan?
The Magic was definitely the team I was thinking of. That we heard a ton of rumors with them before the trade deadline. Nothing ever happened. Now that the season is somewhat over, we don't really know for sure, but if the season does end, I think they're going to have some more conversations about it, because the other thing we heard was that the Spurs and DeMar DeRozan were far apart on the extension talks. So
yes,
you
sure.
get the feeling the Spurs do not care to bring DeRozan back. And you know what? That's probably for the better, because again, he is playing a type of game that does not fit in today's NBA. And unless he changes that next year, there's no reason to extend him and bring him back past his age 30 season. And especially when he already doesn't do much on defense for you. And he's kind of, when you think about it, he's kind of limiting what you're able to do on offense, because you're limited in what lineups you can play with him out on the floor, and you're limited in how creative you can get with the other guards that you would like to have in your lineup and getting more minutes.
Mike, did you have any target teams for DeRozan if there's a sign and trade?
I was thinking Detroit and Orlando as well. I know a lot of like Spurs fans or like Spurs Twitter people say have this dream about being this straight up deal with Aaron Gordon, but I don't think Orlando does even considers that.
Yeah, that's a good. Mm-hmm.
He's still very young, and he's still got some room to grow. So I don't think they're gonna want to give up on that. And then Mo Bamba is floated out there, but I think he's still really raw, and so that would be hard, I think, for the Spurs to put trigger on that. Detroit, I don't know what they had that they could get any kind of equal value out of right now.
Yeah, and I think Detroit's going to be a cap space team, so they don't even have to do a sign and trade.
Gotcha. So the only other team I thought of was Sacramento, just because GM-wise, they don't seem to do things that make a lot of sense. I know they benched Buddy Hield like halfway through the season, and he was really upset about that. And so I was like, maybe they'll take on DeMar and send Buddy Hield back. I don't know. Just crazy.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, and just as a selfish part, I would want to have, if they could do something to get Bogdanovich here for him, that would be amazing. Yeah. But anyway,
either one.
Colin, did you have any DeRozan teams?
Yeah, so again, I kind of go with what does a good trade partner look like, and you're looking at the thing that makes it hard to say which teams are good is it really all depends on how these teams evaluate themselves, because they have to be a team that's like right there in the playoff mix, a team that really feels like they need to make it into the playoff, and a team that like they really need a ball handler and someone who can get to his shots and create his own shot. And so, and a team that, might not have championship aspirations, but we need to get to the playoffs. So the Orlando Magic could fit in there, but do they think, okay, we're not as close as we thought we were, we need to take a step back? The Bulls could fit in there because they were supposed to have playoff aspirations this season, and they didn't really do what they were hoping to do. The Kings could fit in there because they got close, and then they kind of fell out, and now they're kind of close again. So it's that kind of team, but it really matters how do these teams view themselves and what are their goals? Because if their goal, like none of the contending teams are going to do it, and none of the rebuilding teams are going to do it. So you have to find a team in the middle, and that's a really small group of teams.
For sure, and that's why again I think I've narrowed it to like 5 or 6. Let's move on to our next question. This is probably to be mostly all Ben right here for these next two questions. So the next question is about the draft. It is it says they say what position should the Spurs be looking for in the draft, and who could they realistically draft in the 10th through 12th range this year? And so my only input on this, Ben, I'll say is I think that I told you this about a few weeks ago when you and I were doing a draft podcast recently. I think that they need a high upside three, somewhere around 6'7" to 6'9". And you obviously gave me a bunch of targets at the time. But Ben, you take this question first, and then I'll ask Colin and Mike if they want to give their input. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And just like we said a few weeks ago, I'm going to stick with that answer. If you're the Spurs, you want a guy who is a forward, who has upside, who has skills that don't need too much development, who can contribute now either offensively or defensively. And I think a guy who kind of falls into that mix is Devin Vassell from Florida State. Another guy is Sadiq Bey from Villanova. Those two guys I really like at that 11-ish spot. Maybe an Isaac Okoro. He's kind of a freak athlete in that he's a freshman. He's really young. He's 6'6", 225. He's very solidly built. He's a great athlete, and he's a great defender, but he has to be brought up on the offensive end a lot. Whereas Devin Vassell is if you have the scales tipped one way or the other, where Isaac Okoro is all defense and no offense, Devin Vassell somewhere more in the middle sides, as is Sadiq Bey, who I'd argue his offense is probably a little better than his defense right now. But those are two guys that I would really keep an eye on. And obviously, if Obi Toppin falls to 11 somehow, you have to draft him. That's kind of my dream pick right now for the Spurs if he falls there, because that dude is just so good, and I think he would be a great fit.
Obi Toppin, you said?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. Mike, did you have any input on this question, or want to say anything?
Yeah, I think Toppin would be the dream guy, but I really think he's going to be taken probably top 3, maybe top 5. So the one I've been thinking of most is Okoro, just because he's a crazy athlete. Like you said, he's a defender, really good defender, which is something they need. And so, but yeah, I mean, like Ben said, and even just looking at the profiles and stuff like that, he does need some help on offense. But I don't know if they can put them out there with lineups with the other shooters. Maybe that might help out.
Colin, I know you don't watch college basketball as much. You and I both definitely don't watch any college basketball. But did you have a player? And if not, my other question to you would be, what position do you think they should target in the draft?
So it's interesting because normally the draft happens after the season and right before free agency. So you probably have a better pulse on what is going to happen with your own free agents. Obviously, I think wing is a position they really need to fill right now, as we talked about. But I wonder how they feel if they know LaMarcus Aldridge probably isn't going to be on the team much longer. And who knows what's going to happen with Jakob Poeltl. If this was a normal season, they would probably know at the draft if he was going to stay or leave. And they might not know at the draft. Who knows when the draft is going to be? Is it going to be when it normally is? Is it going to be after the abbreviated season, if there is one? Who knows? So I think wing is probably the number one position, but they might have a time in the very near future where their bigs is also very shallow as well. Obviously, they have guard covered with their young core unless they make a trade. And wing is the most important position in the NBA right now. But just kind of with the weirdness of maybe where the draft is going to be positioned, you don't know what your big depth is going to look like in a year or two. Okay,
so Ben, this next question is for you again, and then Mike, since you have more draft knowledge too, you can give your answer after him. So here it is. It's would you consider the best fits for the Spurs in this year's lottery? Is the first part, and then the second part is, if we keep the pick, I'm hoping for Okoro, Okongwu, Denny, Vassell, or Wiseman. Wouldn't draft a guard unless it's Anthony Edwards. So Ben, go ahead first, and then Mike.
Yeah, I'd say the best fit is. Here's the problem, because the best fit and my favorite fit are two very different things. I think the best fit and a realistic fit is a Devin Vassell or possibly an Isaac Okoro. My favorite fit would be an Onyeka Okongwu, because I just love that. I love how that kid just gets out and gets after it defensively. He's very raw offensively, but he's 6'9". He's got wingspan for days. He runs like a gazelle, and he's kind of a freak. He's 6'9", 245, so he's not a stick by any means. So, he could get in there and bang a little bit. But Again, he doesn't really have a lot of offense right now, but his free throw shooting numbers suggest that he could eventually step out and start shooting it.
And then what about this Anthony Edwards guy? What's your opinion on that part of the question?
He's not dropping past 2 or 3. So I'm not even talking about him. I have not even watched.
Okay.
I've watched maybe 5 minutes of him all year, knowing he's going top 3.
Mike, do you want to give your input on any of these guys that are listening to this question?
Honestly, most of my knowledge on all these guys is basically what Ben writes. So
okay, good.
Fantastic.
I
That's
more
my
my draft research when it gets closer to usually when I get close to the end of the year and I have to prepare the draft guide for lineups. And so I would take a point guard for sure. Ben, I'm just wondering, what do you think about this guy that Spurs Twitter is all in love with, this Denny kid?
Denny Avdija from Israel. Yeah, he's good. I think the problem is he hasn't been very consistent in the minutes he's had, and he's playing in Israel. And granted, there are plenty of good players who have come from Israel who have played, but that league isn't the same as even a Russian league, and certainly not the Euro League that Luka Doncic played in before he got to the NBA. So it's hard to gauge how good he is or isn't. I think he only has shown flashes of what he could be and really what people want him to be for whoever their team is. But I also happen to think he's another guy who will stay in like the top 7 or 8. So I'm not entirely sure he would fall to the Spurs anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So our last question, that's going to revolve around the Spurs part, at least for portion, and then we'll go to some more fun stuff off topic because we'll do more Spurs stuff next week as well. Because obviously we're in this for a long time in this type of situation. Here we go. The last question for Spurs part today is going to be, who do you think will be the Spurs' next head coach? And so obviously, y'all have seen this, so you should have some names in mind, and then I'm going to kind of keep a tally here on who we all kind of the consensus, I guess, at the end here of who's like the most mentioned person. So let's begin with Colin. Who do you think is going to be the next Spurs head coach whenever Coach Pop retires, whether it's after this season or after next season or whenever in the future?
So I think that there is a lot of logic behind Becky Hammon being the next Spurs head coach, and I think that's who a lot of people might think that it would be, just kind of based on the progression of her coaching career with the Spurs. But I have, and it's like between baseless speculation and reasonable thought, I have a sense that Tim Duncan is a lot closer to that than people think he is.
Wow.
And I don't want to go into why I think that, because like I said, it's halfway between baseless speculation and a reason behind it, and my reason could be really dumb, but I do think that he's a lot closer to that than a lot of people may realize.
Do you have a third candidate, Colin, or no? Just those two?
Oh man, I mean, I think that
if you don't, it's okay.
Yeah, I think that they probably want to come from inside the organization.
Yeah, for sure.
And those are kind of the two names that I would think are the best from inside the organization. If they look outside, it's going to be just a completely random name that we're not expecting, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, Ben, who are some candidates that you think would replace Coach Pop whenever he retires?
Like Colin said, it's definitely going to be someone from inside. I just don't see the Spurs going outside and finding someone else. I mean, that's just as long as I can remember, they've always found someone from inside. Granted, the majority of my memory has been Greg Popovich, but I mean, Greg Popovich came from the Larry Brown tree, so they kept it in the family when they made that transition. But I would say Becky Hammon is my number one, my go-to. And frankly, I think one, the NBA needs it, and two, I mean, what else does she have to prove? And I'm not saying just give it to her for the sake of giving it to her, but give her the dang job. I mean, what else does she have to do to earn it at this point?
Okay. Did you have a third candidate, or second or third candidate besides her?
Pshaw. No, Becky Hammon or bust.
Okay. Mike, who are your candidates?
I'm with Becky as my first candidate as well. Like Tim Duncan, obviously, I think before this season or when he just got hired, I don't think a lot of people thought that he seemed to be getting a little more credit now, just because he's been the coach in a few games, but I don't know if he wants to become a head coach. Like assistant, there's a little less responsibility there, and I'm thinking he might prefer that. So I'd say Becky. And the only other two options, everybody else on the staff is really young. Uh, so the only other two options I could think of were outside the organization, and that's it seems like Brett Brown might be on the hot seat. There's been some
Okay.
talk about, you know, people not being happy with the situation there. So I mean, if he became available, that seems like that would be an option. And then the other one, maybe they try to get uh, Monty Williams back in San Antonio, but that's all I can really think of.
Okay. So y'all, obviously, I think we all think that Becky's probably the favorite right now to get that because that was my pick as well. She was number one on my list that I think that of the candidates who would take over for Pop when he retires. Second, I had just because like y'all all said it, I think they keep within the organization. I actually had Will Hardy. Now I know he's a little young, but again, he's been there for a number of years. He's been in their system. He's done the Las Vegas circuit too. He's been part of these last few years with Pop. So I have him, and then I kind of cheated here. I have what Mike has, which is the former assistant route. So like if somebody loses their job, or there's even a former assistant right now on somebody else's bench, I could see them bringing back someone who's been under Pop, who's coached with him as well, is what I see. I apologize for that. So yeah, so that's kind of it. And then I think I had Timmy last because again, I just don't. I kind of feel like Mike. I just feel like if Pop's not there with him, I just don't see it. I don't know if I haven't seen it yet that he wants to do this like as a full-time thing. Maybe he does. Maybe hey, it's opened up his eyes a little bit different, and it's shown him like a new fire inside of him that wants to do coaching. We don't know that obviously, but from what I've seen and just because just the way he is, I just don't see him doing it as a long-time kind of opportunity. But those are our answers, and obviously we'll see what happens whenever Pop does retire. All right, so now Spurscast, we're gonna go a little bit off topic here on the last few questions here. We just got some random ones from our staff just to kind of lighten up the mood a little bit, and just because also we don't know when basketball when it's going to return. This first one comes from one of our staff members. They asked crunchy or smooth peanut butter, and then the second part of it is what's the best flavor of jelly on a PB&J. All right, so I'll give my input first real quick. I go with smooth peanut butter every time. I like crunchy every now and then, but it's just got to be smooth for me. And then strawberry jam. Strawberry jelly is just the best PB&J. Strawberry and jam. Ben, go ahead and take your response.
I'm a crunchy peanut butter guy. I don't even mess with jelly. So I don't have a favorite flavor of jelly. I don't even mess with jelly. I am straight up peanut butter all day, every day.
Okay. Mike?
I've gotten in this debate with my sister one time because I even told her one time, I said, why does like the creamy peanut butter even exist? Crunchy is like where it's at. I'm a crunchy peanut butter guy as well. And grape's my choice for peanut butter. It's great, but like if it's just like toast or biscuit or something, then I go to strawberry. So that's just way.
Okay, and Colin?
It just sounds like such an intelligent question. So I'm excited to answer it. I'm gonna go with smooth peanut butter, and I like a nice peach fruit spread on there. Peach and mango. Those are my flavors.
There you go. Okay, man. So we have one person who does peach and fruit mango stuff, and then the other guy doesn't even put it to jelly. So it's all good. All right, so let's go to our next question from one of our staff members. It is I'll just admit it was my question. Have you picked up any new hobbies or projects while sheltering in place? So obviously we've all been, mostly everybody where they live, we've been in the shelter in place. Let's go Mike first on this one. Have you picked up a new hobby, something that you didn't normally used to do while you've been like stuck at home more often now?
There's two things that I've been doing a little more of lately, or a lot more lately than I had before. Paul knows what it's like to be a teacher and having to do everything from home. My sister's in that same predicament where she's a teacher, but she's also a mom. So she's supposed to teach and homeschool at the same time. So I ended up taking kind of the homeschool burden off of her. So I've been homeschooling my nephew a lot. And then we started building like a treehouse for him recently. So I've never been one of these guys really into building anything, but it was kind of a family thing. So we all decided to start doing it. And so I've gotten into that a little bit. So those are two things that I probably would not be doing if in any other situation, but I am now.
Okay. Ben, go ahead and take your response for that question.
I am playing a lot of Animal Crossing New Horizons. It is a fantastic game. I highly recommend it to everybody. If you have not already started playing it, please do so. hit me up on Twitter, DM me or whatever. We'll be friends. We'll visit each other's islands. We'll have a great time.
Yes. And Joe Garcia last week mentioned that. So that's 2 Project Spurs members that are now at Animal Crossing. So, man, I might have to get the whole staff of Animal Crossing.
That'd be awesome.
Anything else, Ben? Just Animal Crossing?
I'm doing a lot of yard work for my dad too. It has been something else. I dug a 50-foot trench for a tube to drain some gutters. Been doing all the cut out some shrubs. It's whatever he asked me to do. It's not like I have a good reason not to, right?
Colin, what have you picked up any new hobbies since you've been sheltering in place?
Nothing. Well, I guess Animal Crossing New Horizons is a new hobby in the sense that I didn't have it before. But I've been playing that a good deal. I've been playing. Overwatch is not a new hobby for me, but I'm playing a lot of it now. And I've finally been able to read some, which is nice. Like there's been so many books I've wanted to read for a long time, and I'm finally reading like 2 or 3 pages a day, which at least validates me being a quote unquote reading person. So that's where I'm at.
Okay,
you started reading a bit more too, right?
Yeah, that was one of my. Yeah, I've already knocked out. I mean, I had started these books in the past, but like ever since like now that we're stuck, I was telling the guys last week that my eyes hurt from looking at screens all day. I've been reading, so I've actually finished 2 books that I had started, and then I'm almost done with my 3rd one. I think I have like less than 50 pages left. So yeah, my thing is, you guys probably don't know this. I think Mike knows this. Back in before my sports life, I used to be a drummer in different bands and stuff. Back in the day when I first was in college and stuff. And so I've actually been drumming a lot more, and I've kind of gotten back into that, just like playing at least like 20 or 30 minutes a night, kind of listening to songs and just playing along. And, just getting back into music a little bit is kind of where I've got, normally when the Spurs are playing and there's basketball on, I'm just so focused on that. I don't have time to have any other hobbies. So that's one thing that I've been kind of doing a lot. And so, hey, Ben, so that Colin just said that. So that's actually 3 Project Spurs members with Animal Crossing. I think the whole staff needs to get on this. So yeah. So if we all, so other Project Spurs members, if you're listening to this episode, make sure you hit Ben up too, so we can get a little group there. All right, and then the last question that we have from our staff members is your favorite rewatch of a movie or TV series during the stay-at-home time. Okay, go ahead and start with that one, Mike, if you want.
Really, it's not. It's really a thing I do almost every year prior to the football season, but I decided to do it earlier this year. I almost always rewatch Friday Night Lights, the series. It's so much better than the movie, and I'm a huge fan of the book, and so I've gotten back into the whole rewatch of that earlier than I expected.
Okay, Colin.
So there's only really 3 things I ever watch. I did watch The Good Place, and I need to finish that, but most of the time I don't watch TV series or movies. I watch basketball. And then My Hero Academia and Haikyuu, which are both anime. So that's all I really do with my media time, unless it's playing games. So I've just been watching the YouTube watch live some of those games because they have some good Spurs games on there, including 2013 Game 6. If anyone wants to go rewatch that for any reason.
No.
But and then those series as well. But other than that, that's just what I've been doing.
Okay.
Nice.
And this is like one of my favorite questions. I really took apart this question because I have a whole list here. Okay, so rewatch movies. I've been going back. So what I do is because obviously I don't like watching set programming on TV. So and I'm still old school. So I still like to have cable. So when I make dinner or something and I sit down and and I don't have anything to do, I'll just put on HBO, Showtime, and those kind of channels and just kind of flip through. And here's some movies that I've watched in the past from the '90s. Backdraft. A fireman movie, if those who don't remember it, from Chicago. Stargate. And then one of my favorite directors is Wes Anderson. So his movies are always on. So the Darjeeling Limited, where they go overseas on an adventure, and then also the Royal Tenenbaums. I've watched that a number of times. And then also here's another one. Ready? This is from Netflix. One day I was just sitting there randomly, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from the '90s, the movie came out on my little thing, my whatever you call it, where it shows all the videos. So I watched that one. The next day I watched part 2, and then they didn't have part 3 on there, but the one where they go to Asia. So I've been watching just random. I'm just going back in the '90s, guys, and going back showing my age here and watching those old movies. As far as shows, I don't rewatch any shows right now. If I do go back, it's probably going to be Dark on Netflix, which is one of my favorite shows, and also Twin Peaks. But I haven't done that yet. That's on my to-do list. During this stay-at-home place. The current shows that I'm watching that I'm trying to finish actually are Parks and Rec. I've started that one. I haven't finished it.
Phenomenal.
I have not finished it. Yeah, and then Colin, I actually started The Good Place like a year or two ago, but I never actually
Oh,
finished
yeah.
it. So maybe I need to put that on my list. And then current shows I'm watching that are actually going, each week you have to wait for them. Is Westworld just started up, so that's already like 2 or 3 episodes in on HBO. And then the Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, I like that show a lot. It's a comedy show. So Ben, since go ahead and give us the last responses here on this question.
So I've been going back. So today I watched Spider-Man: Homecoming. That was fun. Had a good time. Um, I binged the bejesus out of The League, which, if you have not seen it, it is one of the funniest shows on TV. It's probably like each episode is probably funnier than Parks and Rec, but it doesn't hit you in the feels like Parks and Rec does. It is this like despicable group of people who all play fantasy football together, and they're trash talking each other every week, and then these real life events, these events happen in the show that like mirror what's going on with their fantasy football teams and stuff. It's hilarious. It is fantastic. You will also find um, a ton of more insults for people from this show. So if you're looking to insult people creatively, this is a good show for that. It should give you some inspiration. But I've been doing that. I actually went back and I watched the first 6 Star Wars movies. I'm kind of waiting on the 9th one to come on Disney Plus so I can just watch all 3 of those all the way right through. I rewatched the Clone Wars TV series, and I watched the 2nd season of Altered Carbon, fantastic show on Netflix if you get the chance to watch that show. I happen to think that Joel Kinnaman is at his best in that show. He was only on the 1st season, but he was fantastic. And I feel like there's 1 or 2 more. I need to get back into Westworld. I only watched the 1st season, and I heard it only gets better. And I like all those actors too. Like I love James Marsden and Tandy Newton, and Rachel Evan Wood has been great in that show. So I'd love to watch that show, get back into that. So that's something I'm gonna have to do. And I'm actually gonna try and get into some like One Punch Man, and I actually haven't watched Hero Academia before, but now that Colin mentioned it, I'm pretty sure I saw it on Netflix. So now I gotta go for it.
It's a good one.
Go ahead, Colin. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying it's a good one. It's a good show to catch up on.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, there's obviously there's all these different things we can do right now. That we're especially home activities. Should we say? It's and honestly, I live in an apartment, so like if I had a house, I'd probably be on the yard like you guys are doing. Stuff outdoors too. I just have a more secluded area where I have to be. All right, guys, thanks again we're going to wrap up this episode here. Now that we're getting close to the end here. So before we end this episode, I want to remind you all to continue visiting ProjectSpurs.com. Here's the latest on the site. And it's really just Ben just keeping us going. Like I mentioned last week, Ben, we want to thank you, by the way, for continuing to pump out prospect watches because unfortunately, like that, you're just like the main thing that your topic or like the main one that doesn't stop just because of basketball stopping in general. So Ben, you had recently written about a new player today. Actually, it went up on Tuesday or yesterday on Tuesday, should I say? Who was that player? Can you give the listeners a little bit of a preview of that player?
Yes. So that player is Killian Tilly out of Gonzaga. Floor spacing big man, nice little second round steal. He's going to fall to the second round because he has had injury issues throughout his 4-year career at Gonzaga. So a lot of little nagging things, and then I think there was one somewhat major surgery in there. So that's going to hamper where he can go in the draft. And yeah, his athleticism is a little limited, but he's kind of got some nice little moves. He can post up a little bit. He's got really nice touch on floaters in the paint. So, and he's coming from Gonzaga, where all those guys generally turn out to be pretty smart pros. So something you can appreciate.
Okay, so yeah, so Project Spurs listeners, again, if you're looking toward the draft, Ben's continue to keep you all updated. Make sure you check out his work over on Project Spurs. Thank you again to Mike, because he's gonna have to be he's the guy who does all the editing and mixing for us after these episodes get recorded. And then also, just from all of our team here at Project Spurs, again, just like I said last week, continue to stay safe out there and take care. Give me 1 second.